Because most sins that a person does, the Gemara Sota tells us, is a shtut. In English, literally means stupidity. A person only sins, elem nichnas ba ruach shtut. A person can only sin if a stupid spirit goes in his mind. That's the literal translate of shtut, is stupidity. A person only sins because his mind right now is not, he's not there. I mean, it's a stupid move, basically. That's what the Gemara is saying. Because if you think about it, like the Mishnah says, Bekavot, if you calculate the averah that a person does, and then what happens to him afterwards, the averah is not worth it. Right? We're all ma'amini b'nai, we all believe that there's olam haba, and that Hashem watches everything. So the guilty feeling that Jews have, Baruch Hashem, for doing one sin, the guilty feeling is so strong, says the Mishnah, that the sin is not even enjoyable anymore. Think about it. So why does a person ever sin? Because he doesn't think. That's what the Gemara says. You know how a person sins? He doesn't think. That's the answer. Because if he would have thought, he would have sinned. That's what it means. Only because a bad spirit hit his head. That's why a person sins. Where did this bad spirit come from? A person will be surprised. A lot of times it comes from not watching his eyes. A person who doesn't watch his eyes, where are they going? A person who thinks his eyes is like a hefker, as if it's like a democracy. You know, your eyes are not a democracy. A person has to be careful where his eyes are looking. Eyes are not a free-for-all. A person has to be very careful what his eyes are watching, because the eyes is the opening of the neshama, is the doors to the neshama of a person, and the neshama is very holy. So whatever you let your eyes see, you're exposing your neshama. You don't want to damage your neshama. But when a person does do that, unfortunately, ruach shtut, here comes the bad spirit, and that leads to more sins. Or let's say a person is eating food that's not 100% kosher. Ruach shtut comes from the food into your neshama. That's, you got to be careful what you're eating. Or let's say you go to places that are not the most kosher places. A lot of ruach shtut around you can enter you, and that leads to more sins and more sins and more sins. Which is why sometimes when somebody says, what is so bad if I go, let's say Chas V'Shalom, the person says, what is so bad if I go to a movie theater? I just had this last week in Brooklyn. Somebody told me he's going to a movie theater. I told him, a Jew goes to a movie theater, how could it be? So he tells me where in the Torah it says that you're not allowed to go to a movie theater. So I told him, not everything has to be specifically a sin in the Torah. Many parts of the Torah is don't do things that lead you to do avirot. Movie theater is one of them. If a person goes to a movie theater, you know what he did? He basically exposed himself to tumah, to impurity, to bad people, to a bad situation, to bad spirits, and that will lead him to do very bad things. So not necessarily everything has to be, what's the halakha? Is this mutar or asur? Because if a person's going to think like that, unfortunately, he's always going to lead himself to do worse things.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.